Hey everyone, Jeremy here, and guys, I'm very excited for the conversation that we're going to have today. We have Stacy Conte with us today, and she is an incredible coach and certified professional. She really helps people to, train themselves in the right way to have more success, handle a lot of the overwhelm they're dealing with, so they can really get moving forward. I'm really excited to chat with her today. Stacy, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to find out first and foremost about your story. You're helping people and, you're doing it in a very unique way, but how did you get here?
So how I got here. So I'm a mom, and my coaching practice is called Mother's Pathway. So just from being a mom and, when I had my first child is 15 years old. It was a beautiful thing. I couldn't believe the purpose that it gave me, and it was wonderful, but it was completely overwhelming, right? I couldn't believe how stressed out I was, right?
Sure.
And I worked full time. I was fortunate enough to have family take care of my child, but I still missed her, right? And then subsequently, 2 years later, I had another child. I have two daughters, 15 and 13 now.
As do I, but mine are only 2 and 4. I'm sure you'll like my shirt, my Rad Dad shirt.
I
but continue.
I do like the Rad Dad shirt, and I'm one of 4 girls.
Oh, wow.
I'm one of 4 girls, so I'm a big fan of dad, dads of girls, because I had a great dad of girls.
Oh, amazing.
And I'm sure you are too. Beautiful thing. So, so I worked full time. I worked long hours. I worked in the Fortune 500 environment for over 20 years. And I struggled with boundaries. I struggled with being really, doing a bunch of things not well and not taking care of myself. And really I struggled with severe anxiety that I didn't get under control until I was in my 40s. I struggled with weight. I went up and down with weight. I struggled with taking care of myself, eating and drinking too much, not
Sure.
exercising enough. And one day, I was just overwhelmed. I rushed home from work to have dinner with my kids. Wasn't engaged in dinner because I wouldn't even have a conversation. I was just checking the box, and then I'd run upstairs and I'd check my email, right? And
Wow.
I wasn't doing well with work. I wasn't doing well with my kids or anything like that. I'd come home. If it was a bad day, I'd say, okay, well, I'm just going to have some wine and drink some ice cream, watch some Netflix, put my kids to bed, and that'll be the day. If it was a good day, I would drink some wine, eat some ice cream, it was the same thing, right?
Sure.
And one morning I'm making lunches, right? And I was miserable. And my oldest daughter, this was a few years ago, she said to me, "You look terrible.
Oh.
And you're always in a bad mood." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about." And in my head, I was like, oh my God, I have 2 little girls, and look how I'm showing up every day to them. Right? I could say to them, "Oh, you need to work hard. You need to do this. You need to do that." Right? And because that was coming out of my mouth.
I think the thing that's interesting is when we talk about that, we're saying, but we're also showing, right? I think and I think that's the really interesting thing, because you can say one thing, but your kids see, right? And your kids understand. So, but continue.
Yeah. So I was, at first I was like, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about," right? I was like, but in my head I was like,
right.
"Oh my God, she's right." So from there, I was I just started reading a whole bunch of self-help books, right? I was I reached out to a coach. She helped me tremendously. And I was like, wow, she's onto something. I'm really happy now, right? And she showed me a few tools. From there, I just took off. I'm a lifelong learner. I read a tremendous amount. Everybody's like, "Do you have a book for me?" I'm always like, "I have a book for that. I have a book for that. I have a book for that." That's how I roll, right?
Sure.
So, my sisters, I have 3 older sisters, they make fun of me. They're like, "Oh, all right, I know you have a book." But can you just summarize, right? So I just started educating myself, and I realized the happier that I made myself, the happier that I made the people around me. Right? And because what you give out into the universe is what you get back.
Yes.
And I was well able to take care of my family. I was well able to perform better in every aspect of my life. I was working out more. I wasn't drinking. I was eating better. I lost 60 pounds. Just everything I went into this transformational health journey, and it works. That's what I want to share. It works. I walk my walk. I'm authentic, right?
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting, Stacy? I know for me, as I mentioned, my kids are 2 and 4, so I kind of a couple of, 2 years ago now, I had this aha moment, right? Because how you build a business before kids and how you build a business with kids is different. And I was somebody I was taking meetings at all times of the day. I was always hustling, always doing this, always doing that. And you can't do that with kids. But interestingly enough, there's a song by Darius Rucker and I think it's called It Won't Be Like This for Long. And he talks about like the process of your daughter growing up, and like next thing you know, you're walking her down the aisle. And I think the thing that as a parent that you have to think about in these situations is you're only going to have this opportunity so long, right? So it's like, what do you want to make of this opportunity? Because the next thing you know, your kids are going to be adults. Is that something you've considered?
Yeah. Like living in the present moment, right?
Yeah.
That's so important, because I go back into, like when you live in the present moment, you need to be present, fully present for your children.
Yeah.
Like when I was going home and saying, I can't finish this at work, right? And then I'd come home and I'd be halfway thinking about that project at work, checking the box, having dinner with my children, but not being present, right? So it's very important to be present in the moment, and it builds resiliency when you're present in the moment. And a story that I can think back to being present in the moment is, I lost my father 8 years ago, and it was devastating to me.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And it's devastating, but, right? I remember the greatest memory I have in my life is dancing with him at my wedding, right? Because I was so present in the moment. I planned out the song. I was Daddy's little girl, right? I planned out that song. I was so focused on that moment, and I was present. And so when I'm driving in my car and I miss my dad, it is such a beautiful thing that I can recover. And I can say, I was present in that moment. I can smell it when I'm like, like we all go, like you go through ebbs and flows with grief,
we all do, absolutely.
We all do, right? So, and then, you're driving the car, you're running, you're going for a walk, and it hits you, right? You get a smell, right? I can go back to that moment, and I can know how he felt, how I felt, how he looked at me, and the emotion, the beautiful emotion, because I was fully present in that moment. So to your point, right, it's not going to happen forever. Everything's temporary. I say that to everybody. This is all temporary. Too shall pass. And I say it to my 15-year-old, I just said it to her this morning. I said, a year from now, you're not even going to remember this. Right? So let's stay present in what we're enjoying in the moment and live our life to the fullest, because it doesn't last forever. You're so right. You're so correct, right?
So I guess like looking at that, one of the biggest things I think a lot of us run into is you talked a lot about overwhelm. And I think so many times we actually create our own overwhelm. And I think one of the myths you talk about often is you talk about the myth of multitasking. And I think it goes back to what we've been talking about here about not being present. How do you look at multitasking? From what I've heard, I'm pretty much in agreement with it, but I love how you look at it.
So I used to brag about how I was the greatest multitasker there was. I was like, I can multitask. Like, I'd go on job interviews and say, I can multitask. Like, I'm so great at multitasking, right? And I think, there's some people that are like, that's wonderful. And I think that, I probably didn't get some jobs because I said that, right?
Right.
Because if I was interviewing somebody now, I'd be like, that's not impressive to me. Because when you are multitasking, you are not 100% engaged. There's a great book, and I can't think of it now. I'll think of it in a second. It's written by a Georgetown professor. And I'll get it in a second. But when you're not fully engaged in one activity, you don't give it your all. And it takes you way longer to do it.
Oh, yeah.
So from a time management perspective, you're also being fully present. You're doing the task that you meant to do. You're giving it your 100%. You're finishing it well, and you're moving on to the next task. And you're doing that, right? You need to prioritize what's going to drive the needle. Like if you're starting a business, all right, I need to do these 3 tasks. What's going to move the needle? What's more important? So you prioritize, you do it, time management, right?
Sure.
Then you move on to you finish it. I mean, sometimes you can't, but for the most part, you finish it. And then you move on to the next one. So that's my view on, I don't believe in multitasking. I think it stresses you out and overwhelms you.
Yeah, there's a really good book by a guy named Cal Newport. It's called Deep.
Was
that the book? Okay, the book is called Deep Work.
Deep Work.
And I'm a big believer in. I'm not always the best at this, but I've tried to get better at this. Like when you're going to work on a project, like setting off notifications, turning off your phone, only having the tabs open on your computer you need to task, because like when you look at it, like time is interesting, right? Because we can create it and we can take it up. And by actually completing things and getting them done, you can create time. But I think so many people talk about not having enough time, but it goes back to that idea.
Yeah. So, like, there's clutter in our lives, right? There's clutter. And I always say, take that event, that relationship, that job, right? Is it weighing you down or is it making you feel lighter? right?
Yes.
If it's not making you feel lighter, it's not value add, your self-care,
Yes.
right? Why are you doing that activity if it's weighing you down? And it's going to take you way longer to do it.
I guess like an interesting kind of perspective of that too is like being a mom, like sure, like, and also being a business owner, like you wear a lot of hats, right? And like,
Yeah.
and they're full-time hats. And I think one of the things people run into is they have trouble, being mom or being dad and, being a business owner, but also being president and other things. And I'm curious for you, like when you look at that, how do you set the right boundaries so you can control those things? I think so often we don't do that and we just kind of become effect, right, of the things that are happening to us. So like, how do you do that so that you can be fully present in those things?
So communication, you really, and this is something that I struggle with, and I really have to be very focused and mindful on it. I have to communicate with my children, and I have to communicate with my husband first and foremost, right? Because anybody can say, oh, I do everything, I'm the mom, I do it all. But are you asking? Mm-hmm. Are you asking? Are you saying, hey, I'm sure your wife says to you, hey, I have a lot on my plate today, right?
Yes.
And I have to do this, this, and this. Is there any way that you can shuffle things around, right? A lot of moms don't do that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do that for a while. And I'd say, well, I do it all. I'm the mom. I'm the superhero, right? Yeah, you are a lot. Moms do a lot and they take on a lot of responsibility, but a lot of times they don't communicate effectively to their children and their spouses or their partners and say to them, I need help. Everybody needs help. And I found that when I asked my husband for help, he was like, yeah, I can do that. And I really like doing that. I like being alone with the girls. I like doing this, this, and this. And he was able to take more responsibility and more ownership over things because I was being controlling.
Is there like a better way to, like, is there a better way or a best practice on that? Because I think sometimes people can look at that and they can feel like, maybe they're feeling like they're weak or they're feeling like they can't do something, and that isn't really the viewpoint, but some people may have that viewpoint looking at it. So I guess, is there a way to, kind of ask better, or is there a best practice around that, or what have you found has worked for you?
So always ask permission to have a conversation. I always, whether it's with my husband, right, and like, I think I said this to my mother. My mother, she was like, you don't ask a man to permission for anything, right? My mother raised four very strong women, and when I told her that, and I was like, Mom, hear me out, right? So my husband might come home from work. I don't know what happened at work, right? Mm-hmm. He might have had a horrific day. I might be like, I am booked tomorrow, right? I need his help. I can't walk in and say, hey, we need to talk. I need your help at 9:00 tomorrow. Right? Like, I can't do that because I don't know what his day was like, right? So I need to walk in and say, hey, how was your day? First of all, how was your day? How are you? Right? How was it? Right? You ask somebody their day. Same with your children. How was your day? What happened? Right? I don't know if right now is a good time. It's a good time for me, but if you want to have this conversation later, I'm a little bit overwhelmed tomorrow. I need to try to work it out with you. Let me know if right now is a good time or we can do it later. I'm totally fine with when you can do it or when you feel like doing it, but I need your help today, for tomorrow. And sometimes he's like, all right, let's do it now. Sometimes he's like, I need to shower and eat and and then we'll do it later. I promise, right? Never, ever with my children, and I say this to everybody, never ever with my children or my husband have I gone a second time and asked that permission, have they said no. Because you give control and you give them choices. And it's not always on your agenda because you're not the only person in the world.
Yes.
Right? So that's a great practice for me, and I feel like that's successful and that's made everybody really happy.
I think that's really interesting too, because it's kind of, you have this situation you want to solve, right? But I think part of the thing that we never think is consulting someone else's willingness to help you in that situation, right? I think it's just often like, hey, I need this and do it right now. But the person's like, whoa, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like you're trying to find out, okay, are you willing to help? And you'll find out people are actually very willing to help you if you kind of give them, I guess, kind of the right way to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, you're not going to wake somebody out of a deep sleep, and say, hey, I need your help right now. Get up. We need to do this. Like,
well, if the house is on fire or something, I think that might be the right time to wake somebody up. But no, I get what you're saying.
Like, what kind of response are you going to get from that? Are you going to get somebody that's like, oh, I want to help you when you wake me up out of a deep sleep, or somebody that's going to be like, I was sleeping, right?
So let me ask you this, Stacy, because I think you talked to this a little bit earlier when we were talking about a bit about your story, and I think one of the things that you really hit on that's really important is handling yourself first. I think so many times we try to give to people from an empty cup, and you can't do that. There's nothing there to give from. And I guess when you're looking at it, like, I guess looking then versus now, like, how has your self-care changed? And I guess what kind of habits have you put in place for yourself to continue that?
So I stop, right? I used to be in a rush to go nowhere, right? I'm very type A by nature. I am intense by nature. And I really have to take a step back and really focus on what kind of energy I'm giving out into, the world, right? Not everybody, wants what I want, so not everybody, and I don't want what other people want. I have to understand that. But really slowing down and being very intentional about how you do things. Not everything needs to be done today, right? And also, like, when, a lot of moms, they don't go to doctor's appointments because they need to take their children to doctor's appointments. How many moms do you know that are like, oh, I've had this pain in my shoulder for 6 weeks now? I just don't have time because little Joey has to go to physical therapy. Well, you know what? That pain's going to move to your leg. Then you're not going to exercise, you're going to gain weight, and there's going to be more pain, right?
Yes.
So you're sort of making your own destiny by ignoring those things, and I learned the hard way. You create more problems when you ignore things. You can't ignore things. You have to listen to your body. You have to listen to your emotions. You have to listen to your feelings. And just because somebody doesn't think something's important to you doesn't mean that it's not important. Like what I just said before, I don't want the same things that other people want, and they don't want the same things that I want. Everybody has their own journey and their own story and their own purpose in life, their own why, right? So really focus on your why and be authentic. So I'm very intentional on being authentic to myself and really focusing on what is going to make me happy.
Amazing. Well, Stacy, I've really enjoyed this conversation. For people listening, if they want to find out more about you or if they're interested in connecting further with you, because maybe they're looking for the same kind of help, how would they do that?
So motherspathway.com. And I'm really passionate about what I do. So I also created a thrivingmothersguide.com. So if you go to, it's a free gift. And it's 5 tips on how to be a thriving mom. So it's thrivingmothersguide.com. You go there, you can get your free gift.
Very cool. Well, Stacy Conte, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you so much.